You know, when you look at a world map, it all seems so simple, right? Just a bunch of clean lines separating one country from the next. But the reality of what actually defines a country, what gives it the right to even exist, well, that's one of the most complex and heated puzzles in the entire world. So today, let's try to piece it together.
So let's just start right there, with that huge question. What actually makes a country a country? I mean, what is it that turns a piece of land with some people on it into a recognized nation on the world stage? Is it about having a government, a flag, an army? What's the secret ingredient? Well, the simple answer, the one big rule that's supposed to govern a whole world, it all comes down to this one powerful word: sovereignty. It's this core idea that a state is independent, that it has the final say over what happens inside its own borders, and no other state can interfere. But as we're about to find out, this simple rule, it gets really complicated really fast.
Let's dive into our first case study to see exactly what I mean: the Korean Peninsula. Because here, you have a single nation. We're talking one people, one shared history, one language, that somehow ended up as two very different and very hostile states.
So, how did this happen? It all goes back to the end of World War II. When Japan was defeated, its colony Korea was split in two. The US and the Soviet Union each took a zone to occupy. What was supposed to be a temporary fix just wasn't. By the 1940s, it became permanent, creating two separate states. And then in 1950, North Korea invaded the South, kicking off a brutal war that never truly ended. It just hit pause with a tense ceasefire that's still in place today.
Now here's the truly fascinating part. Officially, both governments are committed to reuniting the country. It's the shared national dream for them. But any real hope of that happening, any real progress, just slammed to a halt once North Korea started developing nuclear weapons. That created this deep, dangerous divide that has basically frozen the entire conflict right where it is. Okay, next up, let's look at a totally different kind of sovereignty challenge. This is the long-running and incredibly delicate situation between China and the island of Taiwan. See, this isn't about dividing a nation. It's about who gets to be the legitimate ruler of that nation in the first place. So here's the history in a nutshell. After the Chinese Civil War, the losing side, the nationalists, fled to Taiwan. And from there, they kept on claiming that they were the real legitimate government of all of China. Meanwhile, back on the mainland, the victorious communists set up their government and insisted that Taiwan wasn't a separate country, but just a rebellious province. So you end up with two governments, and each one claims to be the one true China.
And believe me, this isn't just some abstract political argument. It has huge, real-world consequences. Back in 1971, the United Nations made a big decision. It switched its official recognition from the nationalists in Taiwan to the communists in Beijing. The fallout from that was immediate. Almost overnight, Taiwan, a thriving democratic state, became the single most populous place on Earth that is not a member of the UN. All right, for our third example, let's head to Africa, to this vast stretch of desert where the fight for sovereignty is stark, it's physical, and it is far from over. Let's talk about the conflict over Western Sahara.
Here, the conflict is about straight-up control of the land itself. On one hand, you have the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic, which most countries around the world recognize as a sovereign nation. But its neighbor, Morocco, completely disagrees. Morocco claims the entire resource-rich territory as its own.
And Morocco's claim isn't just something they put on a map. No, they actually built a massive wall. It's really a fortified sand berm that stretches for 3,000 kilometers right through the desert. It's there to physically block rebel forces out of the territory it controls. We're talking about a literal line drawn in the sand.
So, just like in Korea, the United Nations is involved here, supervising a ceasefire that's been in place since 1991. And again, just like in Korea, it's a frozen conflict. You've got peacekeepers on the ground, but that fundamental question, who truly has sovereignty here, is completely unanswered. And just to show you how messy these things can get, you've got this other layer from a different colonial era, with Spain still controlling two cities right there on the Moroccan coast.
Okay, so we've looked at these three very different conflicts, right? What does it all tell us about this big idea of sovereignty? It's time to connect the dots.
So we've seen how that simple rule of sovereignty gets tested in totally different ways. In Korea, you had a nation torn apart by ideology and war. With China and Taiwan, it was a fight over legitimacy. Who even has the right to rule? And in Western Sahara, it was just a raw conflict over territory and resources. The big takeaway here is that those clean lines we see on a map, they are often anything but simple.
They represent decades-old arguments and frozen conflicts that literally determine everything, from the passport you carry to whether you live under the constant shadow of war. And all of this leaves us with one last big thought. If the borders that divide up our world are, at the end of the day, just ideas about identity and legitimacy and power that we all kind of agree to accept, then what happens when that agreement starts to break down? Which new ideas, which new conflicts, or which new alliances are going to be the ones to draw the maps of the future?